0, 0, 0, 0.
It is 0, 0, 0, 0 indeed.
Oh my
Finally
god,
timed.
half
There's an
slash is
echo.
black.
Half slash is back, and a black square.
A black square, yes.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And we're finally here for a map pooling episode. It's full circle, back again. No more OWC stuff because it's been over for a while. No more recap stuff because we're firmly into 2023. It's time to talk about the other parts of tournaments. We figured we'd start things off with a map pooling episode to talk about just kind of generally how map pooling is going, open rank map pooling meta, gimmick map pooling, individual map pool pet peeves, communication, and a couple of other things regarding map pooling. So if you've ever been interested in the topic or if you're involved in it in the tournament community, this is it's going to be an interesting talk for a while. As you can see, we have a couple of different people from usual on here. Welcome into Shiv and Listia in particular. Welcome back, Dada and Miles.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey guys.
Miles. Who's Miles? I can only see a.
That's true. I only know half.
Where's Miles?
Here on approximately 2 minutes notice, I'm gonna be cosplaying Half Slash for the next 30 minutes.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah. Can you start off the map pooling talk? Just saying. Does anybody here like map pooling, or is anybody just with me? We just hate map
hate
pooling.
it actually.
Yeah,
It's my least favorite thing to do. Don't know why.
I love map pooling.
Yeah, map pooling
Get
is
his
so
ass.
fun.
Get his ass.
So fun contributing picks.
I think it's very fun when it's low pressure, low stakes tournaments, and very stressful, not as fun when it's high pressure, high stakes tournaments with a lot of people breathing down your neck, expecting high quality pools. I think there's a very clear difference between how much enjoyment I have between the two circumstances, right? But yeah, Shiv basically was the ringleader for this episode, put together our whole agenda. So why don't you start us off? What are we starting off with?
All right, sounds good. So first thing that's on the chopping block that we want to talk about is basically the discussion of recent tournament map pooling direction, specifically in mainstream tournaments being OWC, Corsace, and to a lesser extent, I guess kind of 3WC, 4WC, the perennial. But just talking about what went right and what went wrong, I guess. So yeah, I guess I want to talk about firstly, probably one of the biggest changes towards this year was more and more tournaments actually began experimenting with slots. So how originally tournaments were very freeform back in 2018, 2019, and in 2020, 2021, they were starting to become this meta that was defined by certain map poolers, and then pretty much the majority of 2022 was kind of focused on this meta, but as the second half approached, more and more tournaments started to, explore and breach past this heavy pick focused, guaranteed win type of thing, and rather, add some more creativity. So I guess firstly we could talk about how OWC did it.
I think Dada is probably a good person to talk to about how OWC did it, considering he's been on the staff team and the map pool team for OWC a few times at this point.
We had that whole thing where we were okay, we see that clearly the direction of community tournaments and stuff recently has been to try and break from the meta, but at the same time, a lot of players are actually kind of resisting that, not necessarily evolution, but change in the meta. So we try to go for somewhere in the middle. We try to innovate in some aspects, change a couple of things up, while also not completely overhauling the pool structure. And the funny part is that it kind of ended up pissing off both sides. This is some fucking centrist doom plot where just you go for the middle ground, and then you end up pissing off the people that wanted the pools to be the new thing, go forward with the meta, because at the end of the day, OWC kind of dictates the meta for a lot of at least the early stuff on the next year for community tournaments, and for OWC not to fully commit to taking that next step is kind of detrimental to that meta trend. But at the same time, you had people who are like, "Why are you changing this? Why are you changing that? Why are there like not as many speed maps or not as many stamina, like completely dedicated stamina picks?" Especially the speed players, I felt were like really vocal about changes. Where like overall the meta until like 2021 has kind of trended towards the speed player direction, where a lot of speed players are very vocal about wanting more DT picks or more maps that are extremely like stamina heavy, so that they could actually apply their skill set and not feel underrepresented or just completely ignored. And then with the meta shifting away from that, because I think we ended up having a slight overcorrection over the years, and now we're kind of trending back towards the other side. With that kind of happening, we have a lot of speed players being like, "Oh, whoa, hey, what's up with this? Why are we stopping and not? Why are we not including these picks anymore? I like them. I really like them. Well, where have they gone, really?" And for the BC to kind of aim for that middle ground, we pissed off both parties, and then I think we kind of like realized we need to commit to one or the other in like internally. So next year we'll probably have like a very decisive like shift in the meta, or we'll just stand still if the community like kind of trends towards that again. But like this year's of the VC, we ended up trying some stuff like Nomad 5 being a kind of like wacky slot again and not necessarily all rhythm. We ended up trying the new like kind of like bigger free mod pool where we try to knock some maps in there to try and like vary the options you can take on maps, like stuff that's usually stuck in Nomad or stuck in Hard Rock. We try to give people some new mods and opportunities to kind of enjoy those skill sets. But we also kind of stuck a little bit to the skill sets and the slot pulling that we've kind of been doing over the years.
Right. Okay. Well, firstly, I want to like talk about specifically what you talked about. I guess the separation between mechanic players and like kind of like the desire to have these like DT2s and like mechanic maps that pretty much only test speed and nothing else. Which has become a pretty big debate point in a lot of tournaments, specifically between a lot of players. There's a lot of vocal players who are not happy with these like, oh, I have to guarantee ban these maps because like there's no matter what I'll lose it no matter what. Due to like it having only one requirement in left hand, while other maps definitely have different skill sets attached to them. Especially slots like Hard Rock 3, Hidden 3, and even stuff sometimes like No Mod 4 with, there's a kind of a jumble of mixes between the skill sets. I wanted to know what you guys thought specifically on, I guess, like we were going to talk about this later, but maybe it's a good point to bring up now, but like the concept of DT2 and also the concept of how, creative mechanic picks fit into a pool and, I guess the current opinion on them based on like the overall tournament player base.
Okay,
I have my own thoughts, so I can
go ahead. Yeah.
Do
I
I?
can-
I'll
I
let
can
you
go
go
ahead on this.
first.
Yeah. So I think this is one of the things that I'm pretty sure Half Slash was going to talk about, but that I agree with him on. So I'm going to talk about it in his absence instead, or rather, instead of him, because he's still here with us. Really, I mean that's what it says on the name cards, right? A lot of the mechanics picks, like the pure mechanics picks that are meant to, especially with speed, specifically test one skill and one skill only, have become really polarizing because they feel either like very good picks for you, but which are relatively boring to play anyway. So it's not as if you're getting these really cool, interesting maps in those slots. You're getting very one-note maps that are good for those specific players, but for everybody else feels really bad to play. You see a lot of players trying to double tap them or just outright banning them or trying to learn how to play mouse X or tap X like Badu was trying to do last year to like edge out a point on some of these maps. And I think a lot of that for other players kind of it leaves a sour taste in their mouth because even on pure aim picks like No Mod 1, everybody knows that pick as the perpetual RNG pick, right? Because even aim players can still miss on no mod 1. You're not guaranteed to hit every jump, but if you have the stamina for a lot of speed picks, especially in tournament play, it feels oftentimes like those types of maps are predefined in their outcome. So one of the things that I think sometimes that's good to have. Sometimes it can be good to have maps like that are guaranteed picks for certain players or certain teams, or can be heavily contested between teams or players that are both really, really good at that thing. But it's important to not only have those types of picks and to have maybe max one of those types and have the rest of them still be contestable in the same way that no mod 1 is. Not have that same type of one note map throughout the entire rest of whatever skill set you're pooling that's doing that, whether it's aim or speed or tech or whatever. Because having those types of one note maps is good as a one-off, but can make the pool and the pooling process and the customs themselves that come out of that pooling process very stale very quickly if you're not accounting for it.
Yeah, this is something that I personally really liked about Data's USC pools, actually, because, you can jumble up skill sets a ton of different ways. Like, obviously, you could put, like, streams in the AR8 and Grand Finals. Like, what AR8 specialist can actually play streams? But it's an entire skill set that's just kind of untapped on. And obviously, in some other tournaments, you see Nomad 1 going in the direction of just pure raw aim, like Grandy Senpai jump maps. And I think those suffer from the same issues that Speed does, in that they are very polarizing and they make pools extremely stale, which is something that is really hard to accommodate with customs, is something I may add, which is something where I think if OWC were to go in the direction of maybe being a little more liberal with their pooling style, they may want to lower their custom amount, because it's really hard to like break boundaries when the balancing is all such a balancing act, balancing all these skill sets you want to put in a pool, but like you kind of can't do it. Like when a mapper gives you a map, you have to accommodate the map in the pool. It just leads to a lot of like internal struggles, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. So
go for it.
I also have something to say on this. I hear what you're saying, dear, about this whole idea about having this like predeterminedness in the tapping, as opposed to the aim. And yeah, no, I completely get that. I agree. Having maps that are determined before they even start is not really ever going to be a fun playing experience. But to me, that seems like just a direct difference in the skill sets of tapping and aim. And where pools as they are right now are so dominated by aim altogether, such that you can have people who their sole focus is pushing their aim skill cap, come in and play very well at a very high level at tournaments. Oh god, that sentence died. Sorry, what was I saying again? I'm really sorry.
I kind of get what you're saying.
Hopefully that still makes sense, even though
there's already a lot of aim in the rest of the map pool, right?
Yeah. So that's what I was leading up to. So why I think there's better ways to tackle that from the tapping. There's better ways to tackle those tapping maps than to just add aim into them.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't necessarily.
True. All right.
Oh, am I? Okay. I was gonna say I don't think it necessarily just needs to be aim. Like there's ways that you can add finger control. There's ways that you can add high approach rate reading. There's ways that you can add other things, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that kind of one note tapping aspect.
No, I agree.
I think a lot of the way that poolers tend to do it is via aim, which could be wrong, could be the wrong approach. But I do think having every pick of a specific skill set be one note makes the whole pool stale. It's just not a fun experience, even for the players who are supposed to be good at it, because you're essentially playing the same map at different BPMs.
Yeah.
Can I just like knock out the elephant in the room here? The pools from the last meta, like the last dominant meta, we're going to say 2019 to 2021, 2022. The pools from that meta have they've kind of stayed in the meta for so long. You kind of like just kept being in there, and they like if you wanted to play tournaments, you would like play those pools extensively. So when that happened, we kind of like bred a whole generation of specialists, especially for team tournaments. You have people who are specialized in skill sets that are guaranteed to be in pools, and that are like guaranteed picks for like 3 or 4 slots in the pool at max, and do nothing else in the team. And you have like 2 or 3 of those players every pool or every team. Sorry. And with that happening, you kind of like reinforced the meta itself. You have very strict slot pooling, you have one note maps, and you have people who are in teams who expect those maps to be in there, and they wanna like see those maps because that's their whole reason for even like existing in those teams. So you have a self-reinforcing meta from that, which only happens to be even like worse when you realize that those players are essentially like turbo scaling the difficulty of those slots. Does anybody remember like back in 2017, 2016, where the AR8 slots were like a big thing that were like kind of new but not really, but they were really easy maps. They were really easy maps because they were introduced into the meta, like people didn't really know how to play them, so everybody had like a very low base skill level, and not many people were actually good at them. You had maps such as Dematory B-Mix, like Sonic Warriors Fraternity, or maps like I forget the other one, which was like very, very big in like 2016 WC Finals. But like you have very basic, easy maps. And over time, you have people who specialize in those skill sets or like just overall want to get better overall and then increase the base level of those skill sets to where like hello? Okay, I had a little break for it.
It's okay. It's okay.
To where basically like the skill level gets put to a standard that new players can't actually like reach easily, so people have to specialize. And when people have to specialize, people are gonna start ignoring some other skill sets. And this happened with a lot of skill sets in the last meta. Like you see speed, stamina, things that like to every like jack of all trades, to every like average Joe who's like good at the game, but not like necessarily a tournament demon. Like those people can't reach the skill level, or not can't reach, but can't very easily reach the skill level of even like a semifinals pick of those skill sets. So like AR8 has evolved very, very like to a very high difficulty level, to where you have stuff like OWC Finals, Grand Finals AR8s being permabanned because they're basically unplayable if a team doesn't build for them with specialists, which we see all the time when Germany gets to Finals, Grand Finals. You see speed and stamina having very boosted difficulty levels. Like you have stuff like OWC 2021 Grand Finals DT3, which is like a literal 8.1 star map, which everyone in the lobby like double taps.
Now.
Or the No 1.5. Like, you have such high barriers of entry and such ludicrous ceilings for the skill set at the end of the tournament, the highest stages, that it essentially breeds a meta and a team building meta where you have to have specialists, and those specialists keep reinforcing the meta. So you need to have those one note maps, because otherwise people are going to flame the shit out of you, because those people exist in a meta that's self-reinforcing.
What I find really interesting about all that you've just said is that, well, first of all, I agree with it. Yes, to get that out of the way. But that's within the context of big tournaments, I fully see that. But for a lot of the smaller community tournaments that I see happening, they go the other way, and they sometimes go the other way and do go back to that 2017 era of making things too easy, and then they get flamed for that. But you'll get flamed for everything because you're a map builder.
Yeah,
I think
like community tournaments, they don't necessarily have to play by the rules.
Mhm.
That's one like very good thing about community tournaments and like smaller
Yeah,
tournaments. You
agreed.
don't have the pressure of having like 6, 7 really good teams that are built specifically for like the tournament meta and are going to
Mhm.
pressure you into following that meta. But at the same time, people kind of like, I don't know if it's a sort of like novice mentality or if it's just like, oh hey, we want to do something different and then we don't really know how to do it, so they just ended up like doing the all nomad ones, all aim or all speed or all whatever, where people try to make a pool that's like not following the cookie cutter formula, and then they end up just making a pool that's bad, like a pool that doesn't have varied skill sets at all. So people are
Yeah.
just very uncomfortable unless they are the kind of player that has a good time with those skill sets.
I think this might be a good time to transition us into gimmick pooling because we've kind of naturally gone from
Mhm.
sort of the map pooling direction and the meta into gimmick pooling. So, um, Shiv, start us off with that because there's a lot to talk about with gimmick pooling, but I think a big thing of what we wanted to talk about was like what's the good and bad of it and how is it done well versus it being done awfully.
All right. Well, yeah, for sure. There's two big things. Well, firstly, I want to talk about how this is gonna fall into further points, but like stuff like communication and stuff like making it known, like making the map pool is like intent known is really important. But also, one of the biggest things I want to talk about was yeah, gimmick pooling has become much more popular recently as a term that's coined. Whether like pretty much if any pool is just not like is if it's just non-standard. So like if you like change slots around or if you use unconventional picks, people just call it gimmick pooling, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but the first thing I want to bring up is that sometimes it is used as like a map pool is like kind of fallback, in which case where people will be like, oh, I'm just limit testing. I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't really care that much about the pools, and it doesn't really create like an enjoyable pool because um map poolers will sit here and be like, oh, I'm just trying my best. Like you could have a good pool and it could also be high quality and it can also be unconventional. It doesn't necessarily mean if the pool is a gimmick pool, that doesn't mean just it's bad immediately. So I guess the first two things we want to talk about was that yeah, following through with that, some examples where gimmick pools, did work properly. Like Banger Bonanza is what one of the examples were previously, and some of them where they didn't because the map pool would be like, yeah, this is like a gimmick pool, so don't expect good quality. Not gonna name any names just yet, but yeah, I wanted to talk about firstly, do you guys have any map pools that you have in mind that did, the gimmick format very well?
Well, let's actually look at Banger Bonanza because we actually have a
Yeah.
screenshot
Yeah,
of that
let's
map
just look
pool,
at
so we can pull that
for
up
the good one first.
and take a look at the pool and uh, start us up with that.
Yeah. Um, So if you guys don't already know, Yui is the pooler for Bang Up Bonanza, both 1 and 2, and he put a ton of work into it. Normally I'd say map poolers probably put on average, I would say 2 to 3 hours for a regular pool. Less if you're if you're more experienced, you could definitely spend a lot less time. But if you're just like a regular pooler, like it shouldn't take that much time. I'm pretty sure Yui was spending like 10 hours a week for each pool. Like at that point, like he was working extremely hard in the tournament, super high quality results. I think everyone enjoyed it, and despite some picks definitely not being that satisfactory, the whole gimmick of every song has to be good was I think properly pulled off, and he really like put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, well, I think to start off, Banger Bonanza in general is just an extremely high quality tournament. Like Yui put everything into making that tournament extremely good. And even though the map pools were pretty good for gimmick standards, I think also when compared to a tournament like the one you have on the dock in comparison, I think that tournament is literally a shitpost. When you're comparing a shitpost tournament to like an extremely high quality, high effort tournament, no matter what the actual pool is, one is gonna look better in comparison. But then again, gimmick pools in general, I think when they're done right, they're the best map pools, and when they're done wrong, they are the worst map pools. And when you're normally pooling and people think you're gimmick pooling, it's your excuse.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
True.
there's like infinite ways to do gimmick pools. I just think a lot of it just depends on balancing. As long as you balance things correctly, you can make any gimmick pool work. And it's just like
Completely agree.
I almost like to think about it when map pooling, like making skill trees of your maps in a map pool. Like you put a map in a
Oh my
pool,
god.
you put what is the primary skill set? What is the secondary skill set? When you get to high stars, what is the third skill set? There could be a lot of different skill sets tested in each map. And if you just like list them out, then at the end of your pool, you could just say, oh, I have this much of this in the pool, this much of this in the pool. And if it looks even, then you probably made a good gimmick pool. And this is something that I've actually been thinking about for like a couple of weeks. It was like my shower thought. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. So I want to bring up because we definitely have a lot of poolers who have a lot of experience. I want to ask specifically between I guess firstly Data, Listia, and Deal, because off the top of my head, you guys have all done a gimmick pool recently. I'm gonna use
Yes.
USC as an example, obviously. Listia and Kara's like
Yeah,
the
Kara's Suji.
tournament,
His.
yeah, the international Suji
Uh-huh.
one, and for Dio, he used to do the Dio's like bad tournaments, which
I've
were
had my fair share
pretty.
of gimmick map pools.
I'd say Big Mig 2 was also kind of gimmicky. So
That
also
was
a funny
honestly,
one.
I'm gonna be real with you. That was more like the excuse version, but there was a little bit of
Okay.
gimmicks there. There was a little bit of gimmicks there 'cause we had it easy. We had a halftime in the pool, so it was a little non-standard.
Yeah.
But could have been a bit higher effort, I have to say.
But
you know,
sure, we
move
can go
on.
with Data first on USC, and what was the thought process at the start and how it turned out.
Okay, so the thought process at the start, that tournament started as normal. So the tournament started as normal, and I had like a lot of thoughts about the meta at that point, but I didn't want to upset, especially the lower teams, like the lower skill teams, which like they didn't sign up for that. They didn't sign up for just a tournament that's like very regional. That's like a once a year thing, very big tournament regionally. I didn't think they signed up for like a very weird or like overall avant-garde kind of level of pulling. So I kind of kept that to myself, and I was like, okay, I'll do it next year. And then by the time semifinals rolled around, roughly, is when I started to realize just how like shit the process is, like how boring and overly formulaic the process of pulling, especially like semifinals, finals, grand finals. Like there are only so many maps that exist, only so many maps that fit into the slots that everybody has, like put it to their heads. And to a tournament that didn't have customs, that didn't like either didn't plan for customs or didn't like contact anyone for customs because like it's not really about that. To make is essentially like I've been making USC pools for 4 years essentially. So to make the same exact kind of pool for finals, grand finals, and to have the basically almost overlapping maps that feel exactly the same to people who have been there before. So like state of California, state of Florida, the state of Texas, the state of Ohio, like they've all been there before. They've played the pools. Like there's only so much I can do with regular pools. So I was like, okay, maybe we'll take the stuff that I was planning to do next year, and we'll anticipate it. So from finals onward, I started doing fluid pulling, which I just took maps that I had said or kind of grasped was in like the right difficulty range, and then I did basically what Miles is talking about, where you have a skill tree, and you see, okay, this is the primary skill set that this map evokes. This is the secondary skill set. This map kind of has like a hybrid in between slots that you never see or you never want to see in a normal slot pulling pool. And then you take all of that, you're like, okay, let me put 5 maps in the pool that I think are cool and people will enjoy. And then every other map, I'm going to try to make so that the skill sets kind of balance out, but also I'll try to be a little bit edgier, I guess, in a way that will make it so that these maps that aren't like the first ones that I thought would be fun, these maps will be like in between slots and will be, or most of them will be in between slots and will be maps that are kind of hybrids so that people have a fresh experience. And that's what kind of ended up happening. Like there were some picks that didn't work, like 2 or 3 picks I think were very were criticized and rightfully so, I think. But I think the overall experience and the overall like feel of the tournament and the message it wanted to kind of send by the end of that, I think was very well grasped, and it kind of worked pretty well.
I see. Okay. That's a pretty good point of view. I think definitely USC was like pretty highly debated from what I knew from most of the players. Some people really liked it, some people really didn't like it, but definitely was a breath of fresh air. Over you, Listia, with your international tournament.
Yeah, that was so that tournament was the idea behind it was I wanted to try doing specifically skill set pooling, but I wanted to just make that straight up. So the whole thing behind it was there was an aim pool with the win condition being the standard score v2. It was all hidden optional, and you had various different skill sets in that. Like you had standard no mod 1 type jump aim, you had stream aim, you had quotes tech aim, which tended to be more sliders, precision, etc. That got expanded to a great degree. Then second pool was for tapping. That was accuracy based, so we had different win cons for the different pools that had your standard tapping skill sets. And then the one that I think we made the biggest meal out of was the reading pool, which was again score v2, but it had custom easy multipliers. There were a lot of ideas in that tournament. A lot of them stuck, most of them didn't. But yeah, that went. We had some really good feedback from that tournament on what could have gone better. We also had some really not very helpful feedback, as is often the case. A personal favourite of mine was being told that I'd not put enough hidden in the pool, where by grand finals there were 7 hidden optional maps and 2 hidden forced maps. But yeah, I think doing that style of pooling taught me a lot. It's not something I think I'd do again, because I don't think that. I think what that taught me was that full separation of skill sets is a trap, and that if you're focusing on having those very specific dedicated skill slots that you need to fill exactly perfectly, and then that is just incredibly restrictive, and it makes the pools just not fun, and it makes it really hard to like have any sense of like self within the pool when they're just all the same but just getting progressively harder. And also, if you stray outside the bounds you've set for yourself, then it feels off and it feels wrong. Like a perfect example of that is when we ended up with in grand finals, we ended up with by grand finals, so the 4th tapping slot earlier had been a low BPM stream accuracy map with Hard Rock, but then that ended up having to scale and just spacing, so it just turned into aim, and there wasn't really any other way to scale it because of how it had been defined at the early stages, if that makes sense.
I think a lot of other poolers also have the same trouble with quote-unquote finger control hard rock picks, in that they end up becoming aim control hard rock picks.
Yeah, definitely.
Sufficient difficulty level, right? It just happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that overall the international tournament also definitely had it obviously had the international feedback from there's the switch. Oh my god, okay, that was crazy. That was
what a glow up.
I woke up in another body.
He's basically already probably caught up, but yeah. All right. Thank you for your contribution, Miles.
Have a good stream, guys.
Thank you, bro.
Hi, Miles.
Thanks, Miles. Yeah.
Anyways, I do think actually the international tournament went pretty well. I wanted to say that feedback from international and national community tournaments is always very different.
Mhm.
There's some villains that I like to talk about in the feedback channel sometimes, but besides that, usually it's
God.
pretty good. But yeah, I thought both of them were good examples. Okay, before we go on to Dio's point, because we have a different pool on stream now. This is
That's
what I
true.
meant by Okay, so we talk about gimmick pooling and using it as an excuse. This is one of the pools where not necessarily neither of these guys are really like these guys are actually pretty good poolers. Both like Evan One and Arco are actually pretty well versed and they've had like a lot of success, but specifically for these pools, they receive like a ton of negative feedback.
House music. House music.
Yeah.
That
House
is
music,
Oh,
Kung Fu Empire, and
Kung Fu Empire.
there
Yeah.
were some terrible picks. Like I'm not gonna lie, like
Yeah.
and it was under the guise that they wanted to like limit tests for fun, which is okay on paper, but when you like do it like in a tournament that's actually semi-serious, where people are actually like making super teams or like teams that are like competing to win, it's pretty disheartening to see that some of these picks are literally just like completely like terrible, and also like not
is this a
conventionally
tournament?
balanced.
Is this a tournament that the pool after round of 16 is just like actually silly? Like you cannot see an ounce of seriousness in that pool, like the one with all of the funny maps.
No, I
Shiv,
think
you probably remember
that's
it better than I do.
That's
That's
Revo's.
Revo's spring duos where he literally
was
just
different.
okay.
It was different.
Honestly,
Oh
that
my
would have been
gosh.
like that was funny because he literally had the intent of just griefing the tournament. Like it's like I don't give a fuck anymore. Like he's just like he made literally probably the funniest pool in the world. Not gonna say the worst because that's subjective, but definitely one of the most interesting ones I've ever seen. Like honestly, like there were literally like 9-star and 4-star maps in the same pool, and then it went back to being a normal tournament after. I don't know why he did it like for one stage.
Regarding
It made
RSD.
it made like a bunch of people just quit the tournament. Like I was talking to one of my Canadian friends. He's like, "Yeah, this tournament made me stop playing for a while." Like straight
Oh
up,
my
like
God.
not necessarily. Yeah, okay. You actually did quit this
Weeding
one.
out the strong from the
But,
weak.
Yeah. Again, like
Survival
these
of the
tournaments
fittest tournament pool.
are
Oh
for
my
fun.
God.
And suddenly the map pool probably had fun, and definitely some of the players probably that don't care that much probably had fun. But there is that like player base, that they expect to have something, and it's like completely not delivered. Back when we were talking with Dada about these players being super specialized because of like this adapting to this tournament meta, growing up in this like setting. Now they just don't know what to do when like Big Black double time is in the pool now, and nobody can play it anyways. So I think that's super important is that the communication is that making sure that the players in the map pool is on the same page. Like probably Kung Fu Empire could be a funny pick in a troll tournament, but it was definitely like half the team. Like I know like a couple of teams. There was one team. It was definitely liability and somebody else. They just dropped out mid tournament in the qualifiers. Like this is the worst part I've ever played, and they just quit like straight up. And there was multiple other teams that definitely followed suit as well. But I guess
think I did
making,
that actually. I just decided it was not worth my time.
Oh
and
yeah,
I
you
just
probably did.
stopped
Yeah.
playing it.
I mean, like
Yeah.
the one was nothing, and then the 9-star jump section.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyways.
Like No Mod 4 honestly is the type of thing. It's like they were trying to be Hippo Cup, but except they just like missed the point. Like, I mean, I don't know where to even start with No Mod 4. Like, I saw that and I was just like, what were you thinking? Like, what was going through your head when you put that pool pick in? Like, what were you trying to test? What were you trying to like convey? Like, why? Why?
There was a tournament, like in 2018 or so. It was run by Kildori, everybody's favorite player.
Yep.
That was called Totally Not Suited for a Tournament. And then that tournament had exclusively dog shit maps. It's not
I've
like
seen too
love
many
jump
of those
spam.
maps pop up
Yeah.
in real tournaments
Yeah.
since that.
It's all like unrankable maps with like complete garbage in the middle, just like maps that are auto fails, maps that are like chubby, etc., etc.
Maps
Like-
that are totally not suitable for tournament.
Totally not
Yes.
suitable for tournament. And like that's what that reminds me of, where you just say, okay, remember all the sense that I was making, or was it? Like, imagine if that didn't exist. That's like that's that Revo's Spring Duels Cup or whatever.
Yeah. The funny thing is with the Kagura tournament, actually, all people I know is like, oh, that's like the best pool I've ever played. Like, it's actually straight up like there's a couple people that really enjoyed those pools, and like looking back, it was definitely because there was like a bunch of like there's like CTB maps, like it was just completely for fun, and that's why people definitely enjoyed it because it kind of like was really lighthearted. Honestly, better than the rest of Kaldori's other pools, but I feel like it was definitely
I just
honestly a pretty
remember
good tournament.
that's the only tournament I've ever dropped out halfway through a qualifier lobby for. I got to, I think, Fanzin's Do It that was pooled, and I hadn't practiced it, and I missed 150 times and left the lobby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Can happen.
it's not
with
for
gimmick
everyone.
tournaments sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how they are. That's how it can be.
Mm-hmm. There's also like the other like there's like honestly like gimmick tournaments. I think when it's like meant to be a gimmick tournament and clearly stated, like if it's the fucking what was that? It was like the Chica Chica tournament like a couple years ago by Mikkel, or the Hawamachi Clover tournament. Like
Black
people
Rover
at least
tournament
having
too?
fun. Oh, yeah, the Black Rover
Yeah.
tournament
Yeah,
as
like
well.
Rover tournament was the
Yeah.
one I remember.
People like everyone's having a good time. Nobody's taking it seriously, and I think that's like most like Osu Caterpillar Cup is a really good example actually of just a for fun tournament where like literally nobody is like try harding. Like everyone is just having a good time. Probably also one of like most people's like favorite tournaments. Also back to Dio. I guess we can put the pool on the stream, but for fucking Dio's bad tournaments.
Yeah. So I guess I kind of did like everything that Dada talked about, everything that Listia talked about. I did all of that in one tournament, sometimes all in the same pool. Kavo, roll the slide, because I have a specific pool that I think is pretty good for this. There are particular maps, like for example, Zetai Token No Mod 1. Yes, the Lamy map set, 200 BPM, 3 minutes, super Gunga farm. Except I had it played Score V1 and with PP win conditions. So just as far as you can lean into, yes, aim consistency for farm maps. This is what we are doing here. But then also things like Devious Panda slider map on the Crates Fallen set as the hidden one. So there's differentiation, there's some other stuff going on. There's also combinations of skill sets, like for example, the alt and tech maps in the Nomad pool were combined into one map. I just put an alt BPM tech map in the pool and called it a day, and kept the win condition score V2. And then instead of having a low AR hidden map, had a 240 BPM AR9 Val 0108 speed map, and put an easy map in the pool instead. And also a tag map, because why not? Some of it was just for fun, like the tag map. Some of it was, I think, really interesting concepts and things to do. Like, for example, having the quote-unquote aim tiebreaker in a 3 tiebreaker system be sudden death on the 13-minute Monstrata anime medley, right? Just whoever is more nervous on the aim consistency map loses. Having the tech tiebreaker be halftime hard rock on Solace of Oblivion, or just leaning into specific things like that. One of the things though that I did in that tournament, kind of like all throughout the tournament though, was variable win conditions, and sometimes variable specific mod multipliers. Like in quarterfinals of that tournament, I had variable mod multipliers for every single map. You could go optional any mod on any map, so long as it was, something that was compatible. So like you couldn't go easy on a hard rock map, obviously. But you could go hidden, hard rock, easy, or flashlight on any map, and they all had specific multipliers. Did I do a particularly good job of balancing that? Probably not. Was it interesting to see people try flashlight on specific maps because I gave it a 10 times multiplier? Yes, it was interesting. Would I do it again? Probably with better balancing. And then there was also a stage where I tried to group maps by overall skill set, like pooling by aim or stream or reading or control or precision instead of by mod, and then just listing the mod and win condition and team size later on the sheet. So there were a lot of things that I just was trying out in that tournament. Not to mention there was some 2B being pooled, there was some tag being pooled, there was some Aspire being pooled, there was some horse racing being pooled in round of 16 and no mod as well. But I think there was very clear communication that this was going to be a gimmick tournament from the start, and so nobody was really upset by it. More so just interested to see what was going to happen, because I left it completely vague on the forum post and said, this is going to be a gimmick tournament. Some of it is going to be bad, but I will try to make it fun.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think definitely what I've heard also people enjoyed this tournament as well. Same with Big Mig. Maybe because the prize pool was so big for Big Mig, but
Big Mig. We don't talk about Big Mig.
God.
Most of the pools for that were okay. Besides grand finals. Grand finals kind of sucked. The rest of the pools were good.
Yeah, I guess to talk also about I guess I want to ask about Half Slash's opinion on like gimmick pooling, because he didn't really get to touch on it too much. Do you have any examples of when you enjoyed gimmick pooling?
I mean, you can argue that some people can make the argument that every pool I make is a gimmick pool. Kind of hard for me, because it's like when I think of gimmick pooling, I'm thinking, all right, you're taking a theme and you're going to try to pool around that theme. Stuff like OMF is a good example. It's like you're only doing maps before a certain year, etc. It's like pulling with a constraint. I think it's like, again, most of the themes that have been talked about you're kind of clear on your what expectations you're presenting to players are pretty good, or maybe it's just like you just established a reputation as you're in for the grab bag, and that's exactly what you signed up for. In the case of like stuff like Hippo Cup, I think those are the generally good ways to do gimmick pooling, but I don't really have much experience actually pulling like, all right, I'm going to pool this wacky thing that fits in no other tournament. Because I usually tend to focus more on skill expression. So
That's fair. Um, I guess yeah. The other point I wanted to bring up was that do you guys think there's anything that's like unexplored, or like you wish that people explored more with regards to like pooling and gimmick structure?
Yes, single skill set tournaments. I think there's so much potential in single skill set tournaments. I think Xylus is a recent speed cup-esque things have been touching on that, but I think that it doesn't just have to be speed. I think there's plenty you could do. You could do that with pretty much every skill set under the sun, except for maybe streams, because that would just get boring. I think that's something that really needs to be looked at more. I would love to see that coming out of people more.
Yeah, there was actually a stream gimmick only tournament that was badged like last year.
Well,
There was,
I didn't play many tournaments last year, so sorry.
There's someone.
I didn't
I
see
think it
it.
was someone's Stream Cup of Pain.
Yeah,
and Jimmy.
Jamara hosted.
Oh yeah,
it. Stream Cup
Jimmy
of
was
Pain.
hosting. Yeah. The Stream Cup of Pain with like Suiku and all of them.
Yep.
Yeah, that one was pretty good though, from what I heard. What is anybody else like? I guess like for me, I do want to see more tournaments that test limits with team structure, because I think that besides like casual right now, it's like obviously there's like duos, there's 4v4, there's like 2v2 with teams of 4, stuff that like makes you have to individually think about what players you're drafting is more interesting, like besides the fact that these players are good at it. For instance, like there's a tournament recently where it was like funny enough, Evan One's tournament is like every week you must bench a player straight up. And then like there was another tournament that I played called Heart Strip, and they were like, if you don't have the American flag on your team, like, or like everyone that has American flag must play a pick, like for this map, and if your team has no American players, you lose the map immediately, like straight up. Like there's definitely some, I think, team structure things that could be really interesting. I like the whole thing was like I think there's another tournament where it was like everyone on your team must be of a different flag, which I thought would be really cool.
Schedule.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of unexplored things with regards to like more like besides just rather pooling, but also I guess this digs into more like just tournaments overall that can be explored.
I think that digs more into hosting. In regards to
Yeah.
map pooling, I think pooling by skill set group or without grouping at all is not dug into enough at all. Mostly because it's hard. So
yeah, it's really fucking hard.
Mostly because it's hard, right? Like it's just difficult to do.
That was my biggest issue with KISS, because I think had I had more time and mental space to go over that, in more detail, I think that tournament would have gone down a lot better. But as it is, it just kind of petered out towards the end. So I think I know I said already that I don't want to do that again, but I think if I did want to do that again, I would do it again. That is the
Right.
biggest non-sentence I've ever said in my life. I am so sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Go for it.
Things that map pullers don't do ever, but I think it should be experimented a little bit more, especially like it's slowly but like progressively. Someone needs to step up and like put a couple of them maps with like stats that people don't want to see in tournaments currently. Like AR very high, something like 10.5 or above, or AR
Yeah.
very low, something like 7 or below, or CS very high, like maybe something like CS 8, CS 9, CS 10, or maybe CS very low, CS 0, or some stuff like that, where people are just like so accustomed and so like dead set on maps within their comfortable AR range, within their comfortable CS range, etc., where every map kind of has to be that way. And if you kind of slowly open up this horizon, you can have, I think, a more creative set of maps overall eventually when people get used to it.
Right.
I think
Yeah,
there's a lot
I'm
of
not
people who are doing that. Like Kanyo, for example, was doing a lot of that. I've long been a proponent of CS 8, 9 in tournaments. I remember trying to pull CS 9 Hard Rock back in 2020? I think it was 2020. But that was like my first year of map pooling, open rank, anything. So I've just been trying to do it for a while. I think I agree though. Very few people are actually open to the idea, so it becomes a lot harder to get people on board with it. And I think if more map poolers end up doing it, then it'll give us more, not to say breathing room, but more room for creativity with the rest of the pools, because you can almost use those types of extreme metadata as a gimmick pick in and of themselves, rather than as a pick that corresponds to some other skill set. Like playing a CS 10 map is very different from playing a CS 6.5 precision map in Hard Rock for the vast majority of players. Like it's almost an entirely different game, but it is still a skill set. So I think it gives you more room for creative license with how you handle the map pools.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we're now at the stage of there exist like 7.8, 7.98 star pools that still call CS 6.5 precision.
Right. That's actually it's a good gateway into another topic I want to talk about. But I do want to bring up one map pooler specifically who I know actually has been working a lot with dealing with dealing with these limit test stats, and that's actually Hitomi-chan. If you check his recent pools, a lot of times he's been pulling DT4 at AR 10.5, AR 10.6. He also does do CS8 pooling, and although these pool gimmicks and sometimes the maps are actually very well, I wanted to dive into the next topic, which is like communication and map pooling, and specifically communication in not only feedback channel, but
That
also
is the most underhanded segue I've ever heard in my life.
communication between map poolers as well. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I do think that although Hitomi-chan, a lot of he's actually a very like strong pooler. Like a lot of times people dislike him only because the way he portrays his ideas is very stubborn at times, and it even led to the recently his own tournament, like he didn't get enough signups, so he just said he wasn't pulling for it, and he got other pullers. I think he got Schooly and he got Knight to pull instead of him, which is kind of crazy to me because I didn't think he'd do that type of stuff. But yeah, this actually leads directly. I wanted to mention with since Dada was I think working on it. Dada, you worked on the K-Act tournament, right? With Will Stetson.
Yes.
I wanted to talk about how like communication between, I guess there was a lack of communication, I guess, or I'm not too sure what happened, but between you and Will Stetson and Kay, what actually happened, because that was probably one of the biggest tournaments where in like the feedback channel there was really essays being typed every 30 minutes by some different player. Like it was crazy.
That tournament was just everyone had a different idea of what the tournament should be. Where you had the host that was like, oh, I want this to be a normal tournament, but with ACK win condition. You had poolers like me and Will, where we were like, we have an ACK win condition. Let's use the ACK win condition to put maps that would otherwise not be good maps in pools, or not work in the same way, because you can just cheese them and then combo game triumphs overall. But let's use the ACK win condition to make those maps feasible, make those maps viable. And you had players who didn't want either. It's weird. You had a couple players who were like, "Oh, hey, why is the pool so boring? Why is the pool so normal?" And then you had a couple players who was like, "Dude, this map is mistimed, or this map is fucked up. This is not appropriate for a tournament." So what ended up happening is that you just had factions formed in the Mappooling channel. They were constantly throwing shit at each other, and then over maybe semifinals or finals weekend, Kay actually brought in someone else to pull, and as soon as she did that, we were like, okay, if that's the case, where you're bringing someone else to pull to appease people, or to otherwise try to hold us back in the vision that we had, and I guess just why are we even here? Why are we even trying to pull when clearly it would have been better off in the first place to have someone that shared your vision of the tournament? So either yourself or someone that you specifically instruct. That was that situation of that tournament, and it ended up just becoming a toxic environment everywhere, not just in the feedback channel, but in the internal discussions, and then staff voice chats. People were just losing their minds. So yeah, that was that with that.
Right. Yeah, definitely was a huge storm at the time. And I guess, yeah, one of the biggest problems that you tipped on is that the host and the map pooler had different visions, and that's the biggest problem, is that you guys both envisioned something different. I don't think you or Worcester did a bad job of pooling, but what was in line with the host and the map pooler and also the players was completely different. What the host wants is that obviously they don't want their tournament to look bad, so they want to try and appease the players no matter what. That's why usually when host is the map pooler, typically they're pretty open to feedback. But when you have this separate entity of map poolers themselves, it does get a little cluttered. And I do think that was one of the biggest problems. And also the fact that they brought in a different pooler, although he did do a pretty good job, it definitely is really disrespectful to the previous poolers, because it's not like they didn't put any work in. It was just that it was an issue that was properly resolved, and it was kind of like a temporary or a buyout situation where it's okay, I don't want to try and fix this. I'm just gonna just get somebody else to do it instead. I was wondering how you guys felt about that. Between the whole idea of for instance, half slash. Let's talk about your situation where you don't really host that many tournaments, right? But you're always actually very active as a map pooler in these tournaments. How do you actually communicate with the host and what you want? How do you usually make it work, pretty much?
Well, it's just this is just a matter of knowing each other more or less, because it's so I mostly do my pooling for Vinxis for Courses, and it's just we've been staffing tournaments together for, I don't know, 7 years now, something like that. It's I know Vinxis, he knows me. He cares about getting something good, and I care about, all right, I think I know what good looks like. So we kind of agree on that side. And the implicit bargain there is, as long as shit doesn't fly to him. As long as there's not widespread outrage of quality, and it's not to the detriment of the vision, it's fine. And most of the rest of the staff is on board with that as well. Although there are, of course, when you start to get more voices in the room, a lot of people start to disagree on what good means, and then you start to get a little bit of that internal stuff. But mostly everyone's on the same page, right? It's And that as long as the goals, like we can agree on what we want out of the pools, regardless of whether people complain or not, I think then we're good. So it's like that has evolved over time because it's like Course Ace has been going on for, in under its previous name since 2015. So it's like the definition has evolved. It's like, okay, we're just gonna make a pool to, okay, now we're gonna make something like original, and then it's like now we're gonna do something that's, more of this more in line with what people expect, and then back to original, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like those expectations evolve. The actual like way that looks evolves over time, but the goals don't really. So
Right. Yeah, I think that it's a good example where you and Vinces have this clear connection. Since you only really pull under a couple of hosts, there's such like this trust bond that ensures you that it gets the job done and it works out pretty well. Mainly for Dio and Listia, since I guess maybe not for Listia specifically, but since Dio actually hosts a lot of the tournaments that you map pool for, have you ever had what's in your mind when you pick the map poolers that you want to work with?
When I pick poolers, okay, there's a lot of things. It needs to be somebody who can I guess this gets less away from less towards like a vision of what the map pools are supposed to look like, and more so about different styles of how people like to map pool, or what they usually understand their roles to be in a map pooling team. If I do have another pooler with me who is somebody who likes to sit in a voice chat for a couple hours, pick out maps, throw a bunch of maps on the sheet, pick the few best maps out of that big chunk, and then send them off to playtesters or other map poolers to make sure that we've got the difficulty balancing right and that sort of thing. Then I want somebody who is mostly on board with either the thing that I'm trying to do for that particular tournament, or has their own particular strong vision of what they want to do for a tournament. I'm at the stage where I don't really need to enforce my vision on every tournament that I map pool for. So if somebody else has a particularly strong vision of how they want a map pool to look, I don't really mind abiding by it in the cases where it's, a tournament that is where those sorts of stronger opinions on what a map pool should look like are reasonable to tackle and experiment with, right? I wouldn't do something like that in the round table, for example. I would pool mostly meta stuff with an understanding of what the production team actually wants to see from the pools. In my own tournaments, in my own seasonals, or in other tournaments that I've hosted or admin for, where I've been put in charge of the majority of the tournament and sort of shadow hosting, I oftentimes find people who either have similar ideas of what they want to do in map pooling at the same time and fill similar roles as me, or I find people who are almost like pseudo playtesters who I can throw tons and tons of maps at, and they can tell me which of those maps fit the difficulty range, and I can control kind of the shape of the pool and what it is supposed to look like, how it shapes up over a longer period of time. Especially because map pooling isn't just making one pool. If it were making one pool, it'd be really easy. Map pooling is making 7 pools and having them all be interesting and having there still be a progression over the course of 2 months. So having control over that from start to finish is a much more delicate process and a much more difficult process than just having control over skill set balancing and difficulty balancing over the course of one pool. So I find having 1 or 2 people who share a similar vision with regard to the overall progression of the pools, how the slots line up, things like that, makes it a lot easier to deal with. And then having 1 or 2 people who are there to kind of keep you honest with the picks that might be a little bit too experimental, that might not fill the sorts of skill sets that you're looking to fill, or that might just be too out of whack difficulty wise.
I see. I think that's pretty insightful. I do agree with what you said about making sure that not only are they in line, but also if you're willing to step down. Something to talk about communication wise is making sure that setting aside differences and both players having picks is really important. It's not good ever to have like one person being extremely overpowering unless the other person allows for that. And like hopefully there's no bad blood. We don't want, like, of course everyone's working together, everyone has the same goal in mind. I think that's the most important thing. And I do agree with what you've had to say. And I guess last for Listia, the difference between the other three poolers and you is that I think that you've actually established a pretty good partnership with Karantina. And I wanted to ask how like pretty much that relationship goes with you guys in pooling specifically.
We sit in a voice chat and tell each other our picks of shit. Sorry, no, I mean no, that's pretty that's not far from the truth actually. Yeah, basically we have very, very like almost polar opposite like perspectives on what should be pooled. Because I find myself having a far bigger bias towards newer maps and he has a far bigger bias towards older maps. And that when that works, when we have the time to sit down and go through that and just really like try and get the balance right, that ends really, really well. Doesn't always happen. Sometimes we don't have the chance. We're both relatively busy people, but it's honestly more about finding the time than anything else. That's the big issue.
I see. Yeah. That is true. I mean, like Karantina, Mr. Guardian Angel himself, he definitely loves his old maps, and I do think it's really admirable how you guys both work together very well, and it's really cool how this partnership has actually grown a lot, to like even making like your own duo tournaments multiple times. I know you guys pulled not
Keep
only.
your eyes out for another one in the near future.
Oh, here we go again. Awesome.
Get ready to play the worst pools you've ever seen in your life.
All right, sounds good.
Oh,
And
don't mean that.
I guess before we shift on to another topic that we had, I want to talk back to Half Slash and Data because I think you guys probably have the most polarizing opinions on this. But I talked of this to Half Slash maybe like 2 weeks ago when we were first discussing. But the whole idea between is the customer like always right in the map pool feedback channel, and when you should listen to them and when you shouldn't, pretty much.
Look, you get me started on this. I'm gonna give you my perception of the evolution of map pool feedback from when I started to where we are. So before we get into that, I want to hear what Dada's got to say.
Strap in, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is something that whenever there's like a heated conversation or criticism, I always think that this is kind of like the way that things work. It doesn't really have to be map pool feedback, but it can be like modding. It can be like just in real life stuff. Something like a heated argument with a manager or something. Like there's always a silver like lining, or like there's always like a base of that argument is something that happened truthfully, right? Nobody's just gonna go in map pool feedback and just talk shit for no reason, right?
Sure?
There's okay. Most people aren't gonna talk shit without any fun like basis, without any fundamentals actually basing that criticism. So like regardless of what people say or how they say it, there's always like something behind that statement. So you always have to like kind of see or assume how that kind of like argument was made, or kind of how the argument was like what caused the argument to be there. Like, did they get upset at some pattern and then they think this map is trash and I should kill myself? Like, is that like is this the cause of this? Like, you have to understand this cause and consequence relation in regards to map pool feedback, to where you need to extract the cause and examine the cause to see if that's valid, right? So if someone is saying something very eloquently and like putting things in a cause consequence kind of way where it's easy to understand, anyone can do it. But when someone comes in with map pool feedback and flames the shit out of you, then you have to like guess whether that person is upset for emotional reasons, whether they're trying to react emotionally to something that they encountered in the map pool, or if they're upset for like balancing reasons, they just have like a bad way of expressing themselves, right? So let's say someone argues with you that, I'm just gonna give a real example. There are too many maps in this pool that are of X skill set. So you can look at a pool and you're like, oh, it doesn't really seem to be that many maps in the pool. But then you can kind of like guess, oh, this person can have like a harder time getting into something like alt maps or finger control maps. And they might think that because this map is a very baseline element of something, it becomes a finger control map, an alt map, something of the sort. So you have to kind of like guess the cause, and then even if you guess the cause and you think it's like complete horseshit, you need to understand that their point of view is just as valid as yours. Like, they play the pool, and they have to play the pool for however long. So regardless of how you structured a pool or structured something or presented something in a way that you think, oh, okay, this is almost perfect or perfect or whatever. Like, if people understand something differently than you, they will point it out and they will think it's not as good as you think it is. So if too many people think the same thing, it doesn't matter how right you think you are. You're not, like, right in that kind of, like, social situation. So in Mappooling feedback, it's the same thing. If a lot of people are shitting on you, and you still think you're right, but a lot of people are shitting on you, you're wrong. Even though you might be, like, very hard-headed and very, like, you think you're doing the right thing, you're still wrong. So the second issue is how to tackle that realization, how to tackle the moment that you notice you're wrong. Do you explain yourself? Do you change things for in the future or in the present moment? Or do you just do nothing? Like,
All of them in succession, actually.
there's like a very underrated thing is you can just literally do nothing.
Yeah.
Where you acknowledge them, like you're like, okay, and then you just stay put, or you otherwise don't like deflect the blame, or you don't like start an argument, and you're just like, okay, and you just acknowledge it and you take it for future projects or future experiences, where you don't have to change anything right now, or you don't have to explain for the person about why you did something or why they might be wrong, even though like there's a lot of people saying the same thing. But you might just acknowledge something and then you put that in the back of your mind and then just move right along. Which is like, I think the most underrated aspect of map pool feedback to map poolers, which is something that I was really bad at. I was really bad at for the longest time. I always like tried to explain myself. I always tried to like, I'll just say it. I tried to pick fights and be like, this, because this. I have rationale for this, etc., etc. You're wrong, etc. But the best thing you can do when someone has a different opinion than you in the Mappooling feedback channel is either be respectful or do nothing. Because if you try to prove them wrong, they're going to have the same thought process that you just had. They're going to be like, oh, why are they wrong? Is this an emotional reaction to me being right? Is this like they're going to have to guess the cause. And if they guess the cause as to you being an idiot, then this is going to heat up. So just, I think silence is underrated in Mappooling feedback. Like, people say, oh, just rename it to Mappooling Flame and never say anything there. Just let people run their mouth. And that's kind of like extreme, but in a way, that's a really good way of gathering feedback. Because if you allow people to just say things without like potentially getting in trouble, they will say like the truth. They will say the truth, and they will not like try to sugarcoat it or anything. And if you don't like give them a reason to be upset, and you don't get upset, and don't take it personal, then that's like That's literally the best way of gathering criticism.
Yeah, it's
Because
feedback for feedback's
it's
sake,
feedback,
as opposed to
truthful, and nobody will get upset in the interaction.
Real quick to add, for anybody who's new to pooling, really, really heavy emphasis on the don't take it personal part. Like, if you have trouble with that, map pool maps that you don't care about, that you've just found randomly. Because that's something that I had trouble with for a long time, so I would take feedback personal, even though I knew I shouldn't have anyway. And it was a very bad habit that I have since mostly gotten rid of. But
You like a map, and you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna put this in a pool, and everybody's gonna fucking love it."
everybody's gonna love this map, and then they all flame the shit out of it. And
30
you're
minutes
like,
after
why
the second.
do you hate me? Why do you hate my map? I hate all of you too.
Why do you hate my taste?
Yeah,
Please.
exactly.
All right, you can go, Mr.
Yeah.
Half Slash.
Yeah. I'll say that Dada has some excellent points on the practicality of map pool feedback. So I just kind of want to give like a bit more context to map pool feedback in its current form. So when I started pooling in 2016, map pool feedback was so basically tournaments. The community tournaments were still relatively new. Like obviously you had OWC, but the community tournament scene was still relatively small. The major tournaments at the time were stuff like, Anti-Beat, All-Stars, like that, the Ryosuke tournaments, and like then everyone else was doing like relatively minor stuff. So no one knew what they were doing for map pooling in 2016. Like, I mean, like people, like not even the OWC poolers, because the people getting picked for OWC were like mappers that had no involvement with tournaments. They were just picking maps that they thought were cool, and players were just playing maps that they thought playing the maps, and that was that. So that started to change because the scene continued to grow for the next couple of years. And I think by about 2018, we started to see more of a focus on the competitive aspects. So you had poolers like in 2016 driving towards getting like getting more common stuff. So that's when you started to see criticisms about, hey, like we're going up and up in difficulty, and we're starting to see the same maps over and over because the selection started to get limited. So like a criticism that now ends up in the pool feedback is stuff about reuse. And it's like that's just one example of when the feedback instead stops being about, oh, okay, like these maps suck or whatever, towards these maps don't exactly fit what I as a player want to see in the tournament. So we start to do that, and as a result, by around 2018, we start to get a meta forming with map pools. So it's just like, but then it's like you progress that a bit further. 2019, it's just like 2019, we start to see the initial birth of like custom mapping to try to address some of these concerns because difficulty keeps going up and like people are struggling to find maps. And the criticism starts to change because essentially it went from, okay, like actual criticism of like you have no idea what you're doing to preferences towards preferences of skill balance towards, okay, now it's like we have a lot of concerns of basically everyone's got a lot of minor concerns because it's like not only is difficulty going up, you also have the player base like growing much larger and versatile. The scene's much larger. There are more tournaments, etc., etc. Everything is bigger as the years go on, and that starts to really reflect in the feedback sense of now you have a miasma every time with feedback. I don't know if it was ever really possible to get like a feedback channel that was like perfectly clean, but essentially I don't think you can go like in an open ranked tournament unscathed in the sense of trying to, because essentially if you try to placate everyone, you get something no one wants. So there's your customer is right sort of thing. It's just like, all right, well, your customer is everyone, what do you do? So like that essentially is like meta and self-reinforcing meta stuff. So it's just like you're pulling the meta, you're pulling the blandest things possible, and then you still please nobody because you're trying to please everyone. So as far as pleasing the customer, a lot of the success, like when I think of pools people have received well, has been towards pools that really stuck to their own identity. So it's just like Corsair Soap in 2020 was one that people still talk about. People talked a lot about CPMC in 2022, etc. That sort of thing of your customer is who you define your customer to be. As long as you stick to that, then it's like you're gonna get you're gonna get feedback that is polarizing. You're gonna get some that is going to be like, all right, this is like really good, and then some people are just gonna hate it, and you just kind of have to be all right with that. Nowadays, especially.
Right.
So, okay, just one more thing.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever gone into a tournament's Discord or have looked at a poll for like a bit and you see like really easy criticisms, and then you're like, okay, I can go to Maple feedback and point those out, or I can just be like, haha, this poll sucks. Like, people, if they're looking for something bad, they're looking for something to criticize in anything, they can always get it. Like, they can always try and, like, even if something is like almost perfect, you can.
It's impossible to have a perfect pool.
Yeah. So you can like, you can. What's the word again? You can. I forgot the word. Literally, just blanked on the word. You can.
Oh man, I don't know the word.
When you take something that's very small and you point to it and you nitpick it. You can nitpick the pool very to an extreme degree, and you can just find criticism in it. So even if you think a pool is good, or even if you think a pool is bad, like maybe that is your point of view or your predisposition to something. So you're like, oh, I can find very easy criticism. Maybe I'm just looking out for those. Maybe maybe you think a pool is good, and then the moment Maple Showcase releases, there's like 3 people writing essays in Maple feedback, and then they can be the ones who are like, oh, I'm predisposed to looking for certain things, and I think the thing I'm looking for isn't like particularly well represented or well done in this pool, so I'm going to criticize it. That kind of thing. So like, even if there's say 100 people in a tournament, and 10 of them are allowed in Maple feedback and say like either this pool's great or this pool's bad, like the other 90% are largely unknown. So if you think a person is loud in Maple feedback and then you like use their criticisms to improve your pool in a sense, or to like satisfy them better, there's just gonna be another one. There's just gonna be another guy that's gonna be loud in Maple feedback because you changed something that now they're looking out for it and they're like, oh no, this is bad. So overcorrection is a very real thing. And when you undercorrect as well, you're just gonna get the same people. So like eventually to a point where they get bored, which happens. But like Maple feedback is a place where you just have to be, you just have to tread very lightly, and you have to like. There's something that like it's the biggest thing that comes from experience in Maple. I think even more so than making good Maples themselves is how to filter criticism and how to like actually take actions in the future that won't necessarily minimize that criticism, but will take the criticism that you found fits with the vision of the tournament and can actually make it better in your eyes.
Yeah, or you can mute the chat. That's what some people do as well. They just ignore it the entire time. But that's always a good strategy.
I mean, there is a certain amount of like, if someone has like put some feedback in, then that's like, as much as I can sometimes then find it hard to then accept that feedback or to take that feedback as like a constructive criticism. It's kind of like you've got to also like accept that that's that person taking time out of their day with the aim of helping you make the map pools better. Like, I know that's not how people always actually do approach it, but that's in theory what the feedback is there for. And then to just discard that because they do it in the wrong way is also not like a great idea either. I don't know. That's kind of a half-formed thought. My bad.
Yeah, to follow that a bit, this ties back to something Dada was saying earlier about like the emotional response to something in the pool. Because some feedback may like if you can't actually treat all criticism as constructive because honestly it's not. Like you can try to follow the logic through a bunch of criticism and you will find nothing or you will go in circles. It's like some of that's overcorrection. Some of it is there was no actual criticism in the first place. They just wanted the map pool to look a certain way because otherwise they are tilted. And you have like that feedback, and that is very real. So it's just it's figuring out like if there is something that's like you can actually work off of to improve pools there, then that's that. But sometimes you just cannot find it. I promise. Like, yeah.
No, I don't, trust me, I do know that, but I think if you judge whether or not you'll be able to find it just based on, for instance, like the name of the person who's giving you the feedback, then that's never going to work well either.
I agree. Yeah. Don't do that. Don't do that. Do not name bias someone that is just someone just because they type a lot. Please, like, don't do that.
Yeah,
As much as you can say that, it's like as a map pool, you're also a person. You also like fall victim to many human traps and biases. And then when you see a name that commonly you associate with, you know, saying something that you think is nonsense, or at least you interpret it as nonsense, then you're gonna eventually always kind of subconsciously link that person's name to nonsense. So it makes a little bit of sense as well to kind of tell people, hey, map feedback is like, it shouldn't be a place that you're just like typing rude stuff or you're just like saying things just because, you know, we shouldn't take it personally. Like that's also like we're humans. We play the game, we look at maps, we have emotions. So disagreeing is fine. Saying something rude on occasion is fine, it's just emotional. Not everybody's going to have the same opinion, or not everyone's going to take this the same way because people are offended. People have, they can't really dissociate something that's like not professional per se, but like it's like a job or a volunteer job to like their actual human self worth. So like people can take it personal depending on who's on the other side. So like when you try to go into map feedback and you try to criticize things, try to be like straightforward, but also try to be like respectful in a way. Like you can say something in a blunt way that's maybe offensive to someone who's very like who takes it personal, but as long as you kind of know that the map board isn't taking things personal, you can say it in a blunt way to have it be more understandable. But at the same time, just kind of like read the room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually think that ties back into what we were talking about right at the start, which is tournament size. Because people get like proportionally more upset the bigger the tournament is because they expect better things from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have two thoughts actually to add to Dada before we move on. So the first one is the point of recognition, because obviously the human component is important to mention, but also remember that you can also consciously try to remember, hey, like they consciously try to fight some of the biases, and that's also going to be very helpful in analyzing feedback. And two, the elegant way to say this is venting in map pool feedback is the meta, and so react accordingly. That's all I have to say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very fair. The point out, obviously it goes both ways. Just as much disrespect I've seen from players give to map poolers, there are some map poolers that straight up like, oh, you're just bad, or like you don't understand how the map works, or like that type of stuff. So
no, I've been there. Yeah. I've been that guy for a lot of times. That's why I say like I've tried to like better myself in this way where I know I've been on both ends of the spectrum in a bad way. So what am I doing wrong? What should I do next?
My strategy there is you got friend. If you as a map pooler have friends, you should talk to them about the pools before you answer the crowds in public. That's works for me.
Absolutely.
I wasn't aware that map poolers were meant to have friends.
I mean, the map poolers will a lot of the inner circle of map poolers is just talking shit about people in map pool feedback. I can just kind of spell out that inside baseball for you guys, where you post something in map pool feedback that's like very bad, and then someone will be like, dude, look at this guy.
But now, see here, you tie in the custom map pooling, and then you can talk to the mappers about it, and now you have even more people you can talk to about it. You can get the mass going.
There's just so much shit talking on both sides. I say also having been on like the player side and the pooler side of it, like. I've talked just as much shit about pools as I have about people feeding back on my pools.
Oh yeah,
that's just how it is. Anyways, I guess to shift on to the last topic, which is the topic that was meant to be discussed previously. I just wanted to go over just for every individual here, like I guess what your personal focuses are for map pools and what you like. I guess something that you would like to see more of. I guess in future tournaments. I guess I can start. I don't really know if we have the graphic for it because it might be out of order, but I think some of the biggest focuses for me when it comes to map pooling is like obviously I can say like, oh, balance is so important, and you know, like I guess map being fun, and maps being unique and creative, like that's always like pretty much like the base standpoint. But something I do focus on is like I want like every map to like the players will like want to pick it pretty much. Now, not necessarily mean like because there's maps that can be fun, but it's like, oh, this map is like a fucking terrible pick, dude. Like we can't pick this. It could be just like a diff spec map. It could be like a clip farm map. But I guess something that's really important to me is that like I try my best to find maps that are like really interesting. And, it's like, hey, I'm really looking forward to picking this map. Because the song is good. The map has good quality maps. I think the map is pretty interesting in what it tries to accomplish, and all of these factors being filled. I do think it's something that is really important, and grouping all of these things together, making sure that this player wants to pick this map is the most important thing, rather than like I want to pull this map and the player wants to pick this map. I think is the best case of both worlds. But yeah, I guess if we did have the pool, I originally want to talk about Mizelius because her pools were very, very good in this regard. Where like I thought a lot of the times she would make edits of maps where she would find maps that are really good quality, but maps might have like an impossible pattern, like a terrible like cut stream, whatever that needs to be changed, or like some slider velocity, so they would just nerf it, and then they would pull it. And this is in the best interest of both the players and the mappers. And I thought that was really good overall. That tournament, all of the tournaments have received so much good feedback, and it's a shame that she couldn't pull Corsairs Close this year due to some unforeseen circumstances. But I had a lot of respect for her because of it. Let's go with Dada first. Between what do you like to focus on?
So I've had a shift over the years. In 2018, 2019, since I was taking a lot of pooling jobs, I was like the main guy who kind of did a lot of slot pooling. Like it was very quick, it was very easy. You could make it in like an hour and a half. You just pull multiple tournaments at once. And the pools would always be okay. Like they wouldn't be bad. So eventually I started getting bored of that. And nowadays, I think the biggest thing in map pooling for me personally is just gathering maps of different skill sets and making it varied. Varied enough that everyone can have a decent shout at like winning a point or two, even if they're not objectively better. There's always a pick in the pool that you're like, okay, I can maybe do something with this. Like, even if you're against Malashevsky, you're like, oh, this map is a little bit RNG, or this map is a little bit like shit missable, and etc. etc. So, select maps that everyone can have fun, essentially. And I think balance takes a secondary slot to that. Like it shouldn't be like your first priority in terms of difficulty balance, right? Because how many times have you seen people who are like of different skill sets or different mod backgrounds or et cetera, or different friend groups even, and then they go into a pool and they're like, this map's too easy, or this map's too hard, or et cetera, and then you have other people from other skill sets or other groups that are like, no, this other map is too hard, or this map you're talking about being hard is actually easy. Like, difficulty is extremely subjective, and it all is based around your skill set as a player and how you grew up, how you kind of like how you deepen your skill set and what you trained in, and like how your reading is, etc. Like, so many factors are into determining the proper difficulty of a map in a kind of like scale of 1 to 10. And every map in a pool, no matter how balanced you make it, no matter if you find the perfect balance, people are going to have different opinions about what maps are hard, what maps are easy. So difficulty balance should be a focus in the sense that you can have maps that you either play yourself or you give people the maps to playtest. And they're like, oh, this is roughly in the same range. But I don't think it should be a focus. This is where you're basically sidelining the fun aspect, or like how the maps should be, or how the maps are like more varied or whatever. It shouldn't like overtake that in priority, where the difficulty balance would lead you to like take a map out of a pool that's otherwise very good, balancing skill sets or balancing just being a fun map, basically. So this is in direct contrast to what I used to think. I used to think that difficulty balance was key, and then other maps, like if you just use the kind of like eeny meeny miny mo kind of slot pool style where everything has to be a specific thing, then like it would take care of itself. But all of those pools ended up just okay if I focused extremely on the difficulty, whereas if I focus on pulling fun maps with different skill sets, a lot of people would think it was really good, and some people would think it was really bad. I think that overall, that last scenario is a lot better than people just thinking you're just okay.
In other words, people think map pools are fun when there are fun maps in them. So, pool fun maps.
I want to add good songs to the mix there as well, although that's even more subjective than good maps. But I think the pools that stick out the most to me, the ones I've had the most playing, are the ones where I've enjoyed the songs the most.
I remember like I was so fed up at one point I just deleted every single Renaud song from my entire OSU like directory because I was like, I don't want to see one of these maps in the pool ever again. And I've stuck by that ever since. Some people enjoy the songs though. You can be that guy. Anyways, whose pool is this on the stream, by the way? I don't even know what pool this is. This is so
I
old.
believe
This
that's
is not my poll personally, but this is a poll that I pointed to when people asked, "Oh, hey, submit like a poll that you think is good and fun." And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back because I retired a bit ago, so I'm not like super familiar with tournaments that aren't like super big tournaments, which was one of the requirements. So I went back to Suiji 2019, where people was like Digital Hypno and Exarch, I think, were pulling this, and even though it's kind of like proto slot pooling, there's stuff here that is like cool. Like a lot of these maps, you eventually find a lot of other places. But like this is one of the main sources of those maps. This is where people realize, oh hey, this map is cool, this map is cool, this map is cool, etc. So you can just like tell that they wanted good songs, like that was one of their first priorities, and they wanted maps that are like good. So like you didn't see a map that's like some graveyard 2013 bullshit that's just like really unbalanced, really low quality just because it fits a certain archetype of map. That's one example. Or you don't find a map in Nomad 1 that's like, you know, hi, I am Fatfin Kolek, and this time I will map aim and squares, and you will like it. Like these are maps that people enjoyed to play, and people enjoyed playing these, and people thought that these maps would be enjoyed to like by the people who were playing the tournament, and they were. Like this is a quarterfinals pool. This map pool, this tournament, the map pools weren't perfect, but like I can look at this pool and be like, I'm satisfied. I think this is a good pool. I can see the effort that went in behind it. I can see that every map kind of tries to be something different. So like everything rationally kind of checks out. And as a player who actually played in the tournament, I'm like I had a tremendous time with the pool. Like there were maps that I criticized. Like I think Hard Rock 3 I criticized, but then again it was a little bit of an emotional response because I was bad at Hard Rock. But there are maps that I like just really enjoyed, and I think like that's always a good sign about a map pool is when you're like, this was an enjoyable experience to practice and play. You don't have an emotional response negatively.
That's very fair. All right. I guess we can go on to the next pool. I don't really know what's next. Pool wise, but between /Dio and Listia, I guess we can go to / next. What do you try and focus on? I guess.
Okay, so first thing is the pool's got to be fun. I mean, but obviously fun is subjective. So what I find fun is maps that I prefer things that I guess people would consider less standard by nature of. I kind of look at something like I guess generic like just jump aim as implied. Like I look at it as an implication, but it doesn't really do anything. So I kind of base most of my my ideas around skill expression around okay, everyone can aim, like now let's get into the like meat of things. So you look at a pool like this has been a persisting mentality since 2016, right? Like this is a pool where we were in the for fun era. This was technically before slot pooling, although I used a slot format at the time to make the pool like this. And it's just like very clear. It's just like you have things in every map. There is this is not a pool I would consider like necessarily good today, but there's some fun stuff in there. There's some fun songs. There's some picks that are in here that make you go holy shit, because those are very important in pools. Some people call those the bangers, but obviously the bangers are subjective. So here I'm really just saying what maps have an impact. What if you're just going in like from playing solo to standard, what maps are gonna freak you out, and how many of those are in the pool? If those maps are there, then it's good for me. Like that's yeah.
All right. That's
What maps in this pool did that, by the
Hey,
Oh,
Jude.
the ones that freak you out. Okay, so this was 2016. Let's see. All right, like
Game Brain, surely.
like
Yeah,
Game
yeah,
Brain
FC
was
Ultramarine.
Game Brain was pretty insane. The first hidden map is like the Fonzin one. That one was pretty
Oh,
insane.
that's
The
right. I
ninja
see.
The
like
X Chippy map set, dude. I thought that was
Okay.
an entirely
all right, but
different map.
that ninja on Elvis Hard Rock, like that's the holy
Yeah.
shit one. Hey
Oh,
Judo,
dude, that map is hard.
yeah. Oh, you want to talk about hard? Look at Bloody Scarlet Nightmare. Doesn't that sound hard? Like just even by the name of the song, like
That map is
Sounds
unhit sounded,
hard.
so I instantly think the pool's bad.
oh
Yeah.
well, this
Real,
was before
so
anyone
real.
cared. So yeah.
Yeah,
So
this
that's
is kind of like this is like the old pools where you can see the imperfections. You can see like the decisions that are like, oh hey, in a modern lens this wouldn't fly, but like there's effort and there's passion put into this, and there's its own rationale. It is respected in this.
Yeah, that's very true. This kind of a sick pool, I'm not gonna lie. For its time. Anyways, let's go on to Listia's pool, which I believe she has the Psycho one, so.
Yeah, I think me and Saika have a relatively similar outlook when it comes to pooling.
Dada trying to
Um,
read orange text.
Yeah,
White
no,
and
dude.
orange.
I did say when I sent this, I'm sorry for the unreadability. Blame Psycho. This is not my fault. Well, so yeah, this is a Psycho pool. What I really like about this pool is it does something that I like to try and do, which is like taking the more like standard ideas behind each of these slots and like adding some kind of twist to the ones that are boring. Like if you look at this Nomad 1, that is not your standard normal aim map. It's not just like jumps and nothing else. The jumps are actually interesting to play. Sorry, letting a bit of skill set bias out there. You look at the hidden one. The hidden one is a tech map. It's Amy Tech. You look at DT2 and it's Sky High. Yeah, no, I just like that whole idea. It's not a perfect pool. There's definitely some picks that I'm not a fan of, but I just think that he tackled the idea of just doing that twist on a normal pool for this entire tournament. Actually, this is Ellison Cup. This whole tournament, I think he did it really well.
Yeah, it's very fair. I think Psycho's pool is always really good. I have a lot of respect for him as well as a community pooler. All right.
I had
Let's
I had a lot less respect for him when I saw he pulled Millennia, though.
Oh. All right. All up to you, man.
Yeah, last pool. I guess for me, what this is kind of unrelated to the pool that I have on screen, the last pool that we're gonna bring up. But one of the things that I like to do throughout a tournament is create variation in the expectations of the slots. So like maybe not necessarily in the no mod pool, aside from like no mod 6, that should be varied. There are many different types of gimmicks. If you pull the same gimmick every week, shame on you. Stop doing that.
True.
But like if you have 3 hidden or 4 hidden, you do not need the same exact types of hidden maps in the same exact slots every single week. Like the players will be able to figure it out after a couple times that they're not staying the exact same. And I find that most players like that kind of variance. They don't want the exact same thing week after week. That is a very small minority of players who enjoy that type of pooling.
Loud, but small.
Loud but small. Yeah. So speaking from experience, players like variability in the pools week after week. So that is something that I try to do. This pool is not necessarily an example of that because there were only two pools for this tournament. The map pooling for the roundtable last year was rather under the radar because the entire focus was on the production of the event rather than like the fact that there were map pools at all. I don't think anybody really gave a shit about what the map pools were for this tournament. Nonetheless, we were asked to do something with the roundtable last year that was less than standard in that I was asked to pool specifically for content. I was told, like, 50-50 split, we need content hype maps that the average BTMC Twitch chatter will immediately know what they are, and 50%, okay, these can fit in a tournament, but they should still be hype types of maps. So I wanted to bring up this pool specifically to talk about pooling in that way for specific events, because like Dada, you've pulled for Moist Critical Stream where people don't even know what Osu is, right? Like most of us here have pulled for like actually all of us here have pulled for pretty large community tournaments where you've got tons and tons of people watching. The roundtable is kind of an exception to that in that there was an explicit focus on pool for content and not necessarily like pool a super balanced normal pool. Like I have Freedom Dive, Kigurumi, Kokosoko as the first 3 maps in the map pool, for God's sakes. You kind of know what you're getting into. But I guess I just wanted to hear like opinions on how to pool for content in tasteful ways in situations that don't necessarily mirror the roundtable, because this is kind of the exception to the rule where you're not supposed to do this, but it works anyway because that's the kind of event it was.
Pulling for content. Pulling for...
Yeah, I think I have some things to say on.
You can go first.
Yeah. So when I think of pulling for content, I'm thinking of like outside of roundtable. I think something like skills show matches, where essentially you had like a bunch of show matches on 9-star pools. It's like you get these all stars, and then they go and play some crazy pool, and that's that. So I think that's something, but so people seem to receive the first couple much better than the last one, because I think then the last ones they started to try to make like actual pools at 9 stars. rather than, hey, look at all these crazy hard maps. Don't you want to see these top players just go in? So it's just like, I think really when you're pulling for content, you got to see what do people get excited for. They're looking for something that they can relate to, but yet is unique. So it's like hitting that balancing act of what do people understand and what do they think is unique. This rules out the most gimmicky maps because people cannot relate to those. But it also rules out the farmiest of the farm. Like this, no one wants to see like a sidetracked day DT in a content pool because everyone knows that map. Like everyone knows how it's played. Like if you have something like Plasma Gun DT or something crazy like that, like, nobody cares. No one wants to see that. They want to see like a loved map from like a couple years ago that like maybe it's come up in a multi once or twice and it's appeared and that's that. They probably don't want to see like a custom unless it's on such a meme of a song that everyone can kind of recognize and get on the same page of, oh, this is such a meme song. It would be funny if like we had a funny map on this.
I would like to direct your attention to the double time one in the map pool on screen. No halation, but shoddy's like a melody in my head.
Yeah,
staring you in the face right now.
Yeah.
There's even a custom, is it?
Yeah.
No, that's just a ranked map.
It's just a ranked map.
Yeah.
Ranked. Monaco was on some shit when you made that.
What you needed in this pool is you needed that Daramok map where it's like shoddy it's like Get Low remixed with matched up with something. Dada nominated that.
He's cooking actually. He's cooking with that.
Okay.
To be fair, we did have pudding funfair in this pool, which I think is about as far into gimmick shit as you can go without being like unrecognizable to the average player, right?
Yeah.
The average player sees that and knows just how impossible it is for them at a glance. So
yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing because I think whenever you're pulling for hype, pulling for content, people need to recognize the maps, and if they're custom, which we had this situation with CPMC. CPMC was every map was custom. How do we make a hype or content kind of like map for that? Oh, just make it like very obviously very hard or very obviously very weird. So like people can people grasp simple concepts. People grasp recognition, people grasp difficulty, and people grasp like over-the-top gimmicks. And if they grasp and understand how hard things are, or like if they recognize a map, they can obviously like play it or they have played before and they know how hard it is. So when people actually go into that and like perform well, that's a hype moment. That is content. Like you put something like Yomiuri in test tournament, like the first test tournament or second test tournament. Like people were playing that very well, and then like people comboed it to a certain extent, and you had a hype moment. And that was only there because people know how hard Yomiuri is. People don't know how hard your DT2 in grand finals that you custom built for like all stamina, and it's like just 6 billion notes per second. Per minute.
No WC looking at no WC in particular.
Yeah, people don't care.
People see that map and they think, wow, okay, this is just happening, and they don't realize how stupidly fucking hard that is to play.
But if people know the difficulty, either through the difficulty is screaming in their face, or otherwise they know the map and therefore can kind of relativize the difficulty to a point that can actually grasp it, then they know that a map is hard and they pop off when someone does ball it. Which is like, this is why OWCs kind of felt a little bit weird when they introduced customs and they stopped heading too much into this like kind of hyper, more broad appeal kind of pools. So yeah, that's what makes hype pooling hype. And should you do it every time? No. Like, obviously, small community tournaments, nobody cares. Nobody cares if Freedom dives in a pool and someone can like get 400k, 500k on it. But people care if they're
17 people watching definitely care.
And the 13 people, yeah. One of them is Nightbot. Two of them are people in the teams that are like just watching the stream, seeing how people do because they're benched. And the other 10 are like friends of the stream. But like if you're playing in a big tournament, then yeah, sure, the NPCs in Twitch chat. I say NPCs, sorry, it's disrespectful. But like the people who are like randoms or don't know the game that much, like
The crowd,
fixed
Dada.
it
The
to
crowd.
crowd. You fixed it to randoms.
The crowd. It's the
You
swarm.
said
It's
NPCs. You apologized and you
mass.
fixed it to randoms.
people.
Donna,
Well, yeah,
once
if
a
they-
toxic
if they
map
pop
pooler
off-
in the feedback channel, always a toxic map pooler.
Now
in
he's
the
a toxic
feedback
map
channel.
pooler on the cam. Let's go.
Let's go, man.
Oh my god.
My goodness.
you get
Oh
me.
dear.
Oh lord.
Oh.
I think I pretty much agree with everything that's been said about pooling for content. You can't do it all the time. It has to be recognizable stuff, whether that's the map by name, the mapper by name, the difficulty of the map, or what have you. It has to be recognizable.
I'm not so sure it has to be recognizable, actually. I think the thing that made CPMC work so well, because those were all customs, those were, in a lot of cases, quite obscure songs. Like, not all of them, but a lot of them. But it still worked because of what I think it was Dad I was talking about, with the you can see that the map is hard. I think that is far more important than having that moment where you're those two guys pointing at the background and you see a map that you've played before and you found it hard and people are doing well on it.
I think I should have explained better. I think
Yeah.
what I was meaning to say is the ability to easily recognize difficulty
Yes,
as
that's,
well. Like
mhm.
either recognize the map or the mapper or the difficulty of the map immediately. And then just don't do it all the time. There is a time and place for it. It does not need to be every pool. It does not need to be every community tournament. But if you are running a tournament and you have some interest from a community and you think Grand Finals is going to be hype on stream and you want to put a hype map or two in, then put a hype map or two in. But don't overdo it. That's all.
Another interesting thing is I found that the people who are most accurately able to gauge difficulty in pools like this, like to the average viewer, are the people who have like less experience playing the game at a high level. Because once you get to people who are, say, in the top 100 and they have a very different idea of what looks difficult to the rest of the community, and that can sometimes cause somewhat of a disconnect.
Yeah. That's also pretty fair, I think. I don't want to make people wait too long, but I want to kind of get onto the last topic, if that's okay, which was just like a small
sure.
thing, which was pretty much based on, I guess overall, what do you guys think about like the current? Well, there's not really like a map pool of droughts, but there is a lack of diversity in map poolers recently, and also the lack of test players is also something big. So just to clarify for some people who are kind of unaware, especially since you guys are mostly not community tournaments. Community tournaments pretty much have like 3 people pooling right now, like all of them. Like it's the same poolers every tournament, because nobody's willing to do it. There's no gain in doing it. The hosts can't map pool anyways, or if they can, they don't need to find it obviously, so it's usually fine. But obviously outsourcing map poolers is probably stronger, especially since the hosts aren't too pressured. But that leads to constantly right now you can look on any forum post and you'll probably see the same names over and over again. And I wanted to know what you guys felt about how to reinvigorate the scene, not only with new test players but also new map poolers in general. So before I ask, also there was something I was talking about, which was like the map pool document that I was making, which I've not done because I've been busy with schoolwork. But it was basically to try and guide people into a process where they could use certain utilities and certain processes into streamline the process a little more. But besides that, what else do you guys think could help people kind of get started with map pooling if they're not already, if they're just interested but they are kind of scared of doing it?
I have possibly a very unique take on this, and that take is more rank restricted tournaments.
Yeah,
Because
no, I
I
actually
think
agree.
that gives you an excuse to see a tournament that you couldn't play in, even if you wanted to, and then that gives you the room to think, oh, actually, do I want to map pool for this instead? Because for me, the biggest thing that stops me wanting to map pool for tournaments is if I want to play it instead. And I know that's the same for a lot of other people I know who can map pool that don't.
I think that's
Actually
really
would say more rank restricted for the opposite reason also. In that, like, I started map pooling in my own rank range because that is the rank range in which I felt comfortable determining the difficulty of maps. Like, I still, to this day, do not feel comfortable determining the difficulty of maps in semifinals, finals, grand finals of open rank tournaments because I'm a piss low rank 4K tournament player. I am not good enough to understand the subtle differences in difficulty at that level. So for me, map pooling starting in like 5K rank range was way easier getting my feet wet rather than just jumping into open rank where I would have had the shit flamed out of me and probably stopped map pooling.
Yeah, I think that something that's interesting within the group that we have right now is that everyone has sort of a different background. We have two pseudo open rank players between me and Listia, although I've also played a lot of 4-digit tournaments, and then Dio obviously more in the 4K range. And then we have Dada, who's like an older player that used to play open rank but doesn't play the game anymore. And then we have like I don't even know what rank half slash is, to be honest. I think it's like 60K or something, I want to say.
I was basically just the 4-digit version of like what Listia is right now, like in 2016. So
Yeah.
I'm just a boomer. A boomer gimmick abuser.
Right, I see.
Slash is boomer data. Half slash is boomer data, actually.
And I'm already pretty boomer, so
This
No, that's
voice
what I'm
will-
saying, bro.
not
That is what I'm
generation.
This VC is making me feel like a huge fucking zoomer, I have to say.
Yeah.
Half Slashed was Half Slashed. I think hosted the first tournament I played because my first tournament was SMT, and Half Slashed was playing tournaments before then.
Yeah, I was the co-founder of that. And I got
It's been a while.
Story for another
Guys,
time. how that
my
happened,
first tournament
but
was
yeah.
fucking Real Cute Tournament in 2020.
Oh,
Jesus.
Oh my god.
Christ.
So I think
Wow,
like
I feel
exactly like both of you guys have very fair standpoints, right? Like Dio literally just is not like where the player skill level isn't high enough to play in some of the higher level tournaments, so he's more comfortable. And Listia can't play in rank restricted tournaments because she's 3-digit right now. And those are both fair takes. Also there's so many North American tournaments that you're not allowed to play as well, which is a big important thing. Europe actually has nothing. I know,
Yeah,
like,
no,
there's a bunch
Europe.
of,
Again, keep your eyes out. Europe may have something in the near future.
if you're Finnish,
Sorry,
if you're
you're
Finnish,
Finnish.
and
Yep.
yeah, Finnish people get some tournaments because you guys get Finnish Dual Cup from Shadows and Nordic Suji Cup, I think, as well. Because Nick is willing to
Benelux
map
also
pool.
happens, right? That's a tournament
Yeah.
series.
But oh yeah, there's also like the Germany only tournaments.
There
I haven't
was
joined, like,
UKCC. I don't know if that's ever coming back.
I just got pinged.
literally
about it,
just
so.
got pinged.
Yeah,
Right,
same.
I am not. I am no longer in the server for that, so maybe I shall have to take a look.
Every
yeah.
Brit perpetually leaves the server and then comes back for the next iteration, flames it, and then leaves the server and comes back. So
Yep,
be
that's and it's been going for like 20 iterations.
yeah.
What about that and half slash? What do you guys think about the staff drought and how people can fix it?
Okay, so sorry, no, I want to take the lead on this one, but basically the first thing I think is important is cultivating interest. So how people get interested in map pooling is, first of all, they have to get interested in tournaments. That means that the rank restricted stuff really plays into this a lot, where you have people signing up to tournaments that they can play and they can experience it. The second, you need a certain kind of person. Like, there's a certain kind of person that is driven to map pooling, and that is the one that wants to do better than the guy that they pooled for. So, guy or gal. And so you need to appeal to those and show people that, like, map pooling is something that it's like, here is the rabbit hole. Like, do you want to get in? Do you have what it takes? Do you really want to be better than the guy that just made the pool that you think is dog shit and you have to play anyway? Like, that is the person you gotta appeal to.
As someone who started pooling exclusively out of spite, yes, I agree with you.
Yes.
And I have again the exact opposite background where I started pooling specifically so that I could host my own tournament because there were no other poolers around at the time, and I was like, well, screw it, I'll just map pool my damn self. And that's just how it went. And I badged the tournament with it being the first tournament that I actually map pooled for.
Yeah. But
in
really,
terms
what
of,
you have
doing a full suite of pools.
Yeah. What you have to do is you have to get those people in contact with the other people that like started that way, because there's a lot of us that have lots of experience doing this, and we have gone through some journeys. Like Dada's just talked about some of those crazy ones. It's like it's just like find us if you are one of those people, because we know map pooling is made for you. So that's what I gotta say.
Okay, I'm gonna offer the black pill, right?
Oh god, get ready. Strap in.
As long as you have the staffing and Mappooling landscape as you have it right now, who would ever want to subject themselves to this, right? You have volunteer work that takes like 3 to 4 hours, maybe 5 or more, depending on the effort you're giving to the pools and how new you are, how experienced you are, and like how gimmicky you want to make your pools, because gimmicky pools are a lot harder. If you're like subjecting yourself to that amount of work, right? You're receiving no payment unless you're like pulling for specific tournaments, which already takes like connections and experience, which people that are starting out don't have. If you're doing that, and you have not only no payment but no appreciation, and you get yelled at a lot by both people that played the tournament through feedback, and also people that don't play tournaments but think every map pool is the spawn of Satan because it doesn't have 19 farm maps, right? You get no appreciation, you get yelled at, you get like put through the grinder. Who would ever want to join that like situation? Who would ever want to willingly submit themselves to this, right? So how can you change it? How can you change this environment to make it more welcoming? I think it's less about the type of person that you are as to the reasons that the staff drought is going on right now, but more towards the environment has been acknowledged by a lot of people, and they realize they don't want to submit themselves to this because why? What's the reason? Who are you trying to like impress? Are you trying to prove something to somebody? Oh, I have knowledge of OSU maps that is better than you. That is like the only bragging right you can have. Like, what can you do within the staffing realm to give people more of not a benefit necessarily, but like more of a chance to like not be destroyed mentally, like the first 2 months that they try to do this? Because you try to map pool for a tournament, it's like a small little tournament, you get flamed, you're like, this sucks, I'm never gonna map pool again because I clearly don't have what it takes, and then you never do it again.
I feel like go ahead, sorry.
Just go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say, I feel like map pooling is the same thing as mapping when you're first starting out in a weird way, because everybody thinks your maps are shit when you first start out, no matter how much effort you put into them, no matter how much time you spend on them, they're still awful, and nothing you do early on is going to change that, right? Everybody goes into the editor their first time and just puts out dog shit. Everybody goes onto the map pool sheet their first time and just puts out dog shit, right? Like, that's just kind of how it is. So as much as I agree that it's not exactly a very staff-friendly experience in the map pooling scene when you're first starting out, I don't really know how to change that when, frankly speaking, everyone who does start out map pooling is pretty goddamn bad. Like, I look back at my first several tournaments that I map pooled and think, wow, these were hot, dookie, awful, the worst I have ever seen. Just absolutely terrible. So Like
Yeah.
I would have flamed the shit out of myself back then, right? So like, how can I not excuse the flame that others are giving me at the time, right? So I don't know. I don't know how to make that better in particular. But I agree it can be a little bit problematic, but really I don't know how we're gonna change that when anybody who's new at anything is gonna be bad. I think there needs to be maybe if we had some kind of mentorship thing going on like they have in the mapping community, so that your expectations are kind of managed regarding your initial
That
map pool.
could be really cool. I've
Very
I've
hard.
actually done something fairly similar to that, and it's not worked out very well, but I think it would work out. Has the potential to work out whether there's more structure to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think just like I said before, it's like come find the people that have done
Mm-hmm.
this, gone down this road before, and
Yeah, no, talk to us.
do
Just
that.
talk to us.
Just talk to us.
Most of us are very willing to talk to you back about it. Like,
And I think that
Okay,
to counter. Sorry.
sorry.
I want to talk about Dada's point earlier. About I do agree that I've always thought this as like, yo, why am I even doing this? Like, what's the point? I do think that when you do get it right, there's a lot of satisfaction. Just like with any other thing that if you ever put any effort into, it always feels really good when people respect it a lot, and it's like, hey, it feels good filling that staff role. It's like, oh, nobody's doing this, so I'm giving back to the community. I'm helping out with everyone, stepping out, that type of thing. And there's definitely some positive things towards it. And that's why like I haven't even like the true black pill is like if people are so like what's the gain from map pooling? Like the real question is like what's the gain from breathing? Like that's actually like the one I have no idea why people do it. Like that might be like the true waste of time. But you didn't
oh
hear
my
it from me,
god.
like
Oh my god.
I don't actually know.
What's the gain from Osu? Huh? What's the gain from Osu?
Hey,
There is no gain from Osu.
Okay, I'm gonna say let's draw the line there before we get like full existential crisis.
Anyways,
Well, I think that about wraps it up for now. We've gone for well over 2 hours. I think that's about it for map
Yeah.
pooling.
that was pretty fun.
Speaking
God.
of mapping, since we did start talking about mapping just recently, 2 weeks from now, Friday again, probably around the same time, 20 UTC, next episode of Full Circle is the first mapping edition. Half/Slash will be back with a completely different cast of characters on the Corsace channel, so be sure to check that out. Thanks everyone for watching. Thank you again to Shiv and Listia. Shiv for putting a lot of this together, Listia for coming on as a guest, and we will see you all every 2 weeks, every second Friday, every 2 weeks, right here on the Corsace YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.